Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about COVID and now climate lockdowns, Veritas, Ilhan, Omar, and vote fraud, mail-in ballot harvesting in Texas, and a hilarious fact check on BabylonBee. And of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
And hello again, and welcome to America Can We Talk, and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. And the First Five today, I just want to talk about something amazing, I think truly amazing, about the mentality. It's like a window was opened or the veil was lifted to show you the mentality of leftists and how they just love to control people. First, on COVID. There was data out of the CDC, Center for Disease Control, talking about your likelihood of survival under COVID, recognizing that COVID-19 has driven this entire massive economic shutdown of America, bankrupted Americans, bankrupted businesses, destroyed livelihoods, destroyed families' businesses they had built for years, put us into a society where we have masks everywhere, social distancing, we've lost social connection in so many ways. And here's what the CDC has to say about the survivability if you contract COVID-19. If you are between the ages of 0 and 19, your survival rate from the CDC, survival rate from COVID-19, 99.997%. If you are between the ages of 20 and 49, 99.98%. Between the ages of 50 and 69, 99.5%. And even ages 70 and over, 94.6%. If these numbers are hard to follow, you can go to our website, americacanwetalk.org, and on the home page, under shows, drop-down list of links, you can find this article, you can find this data yourself. The CDC is basically saying, despite all of these unfortunate deaths from COVID, the survivability rate for Americans is massive. It's well over 90% for even the most senior group in America. It is not a death threat to America, and yet we still have shutdowns continuing. We have schools not in session. We have in Texas, we're still very much under lockdown. We do have some states showing bravery. We have Florida finally saying, you know what, we're done with all this shutdown. We've had, I think, 3 or 4 other states. But in New York City, I want you to just think about this tweet. This is a tweet from Mayor de Blasio. He said, "We have made great progress on COVID-19, but we're not done until we hit 0. Here's a look at the numbers. 322 new reported cases." Allow me to pause. 322 new reported cases in New York City. I mean, the city is millions of people. Somebody can text me and tell me how many millions of people live in New York City. That would be great. Text me and tell me, and I'll say it. But in New York City, with the millions of people who live there, they have 322 new cases, but he's pointing to this as a reason why the shutdown orders in New York City must continue. He said 61 patients admitted to hospitals. 61 new patients were admitted to hospitals, and citywide positive tests are at 1.93. He's basically saying there's no problem in New York City. These data say there's no problem in New York City. But this mayor in New York City, de Blasio, he's tweeting this out to say, we're not done yet. We've made great progress, but we're not done yet. He closes out by saying, continue to practice social distancing, wear face coverings, and avoid large crowds. He is keeping these COVID restrictions in place when everything's fine in New York City. When the new cases number, there's probably more people in New York City who have, believe they lived on Mars or something crazy. There's no problem in New York City in terms of new cases, 1.93%, 332 new reported cases, but still, in the minds of the tyrant leftists like Bill de Blasio, it's a reason to continue the masks, to continue social distancing, to continue avoiding large crowds, to continue shutting down America. And now I want to just tell you this tyrannical mindset that lives on the left in the world. It's not just the anti-American left in America. It's around the world. This tyrant kind of mindset that says, if we can find a reason to control people, we will. If we can find a reason to take away their freedom, we will. So de Blasio is announcing we got to keep New York City shut down because of 332 new reported cases. But the reason, the point of the first 5 today, okay, so the COVID lockdowns, you're getting more and more Americans waking up, reading data, reading numbers, and saying, wait a minute. This is not a pandemic. We do not have, this is not the bubonic plague. We have 99.9% of the people are going to survive it if they get it. The only numbers even remotely going up are new cases, which is kind of like saying new cases of the flu, meaning, yeah, people get sick and then they get over it and they survive, which the CDC is now admitting, and yet we're still in this stage where we're shutting down American life, shutting down normal American interaction because of COVID. But that mindset of shut people down, jump on the opportunity to shut down freedom if you can, I have to tell you the most amazing thing. There is in London, oh, here's finally someone texted me with the numbers. In New York City, there are 8.3 million people living in New York City in 2019. 8,336,317 to be precise. So 8.3 million living in New York City. 322 new cases, which is all, and de Blasio, you know he would count every one he could. 322 is 0.0003% of the population. But for that reason, for those numbers, everybody has to stay socially distanced. Normal American life cannot return. The new normal is socially distanced, wear a mask, stay home, no crowds, no fun, no concerts, no football games, no basketball games, no fun at all. This is de Blasio. This is the mindset of a leftist tyrant because he's got an excuse to make you stay home, to make you cower in fear. Now I want to tell you the other story in this first 5. So in the University College of London, a professor, Mariana Mazzucato, wrote a piece, published a piece entitled Avoiding a Climate Lockdown. Avoiding a climate lockdown. Running through the arguments of essentially why it just may be that climate change may be the next justification for a lockdown. Running through all the things the government should be ready to do, ready to order in the same crazy way we've been ordered to shut down life in this world over COVID unnecessarily. Now we have leftists like Mariana Mazzucato, professor at University College of London, talking about, in a 1,200-word piece, talking about how we avoid a climate lockdown, and basically saying she uses this language herself. As COVID-19 spread earlier this year, governments introduced lockdowns in order to prevent a public health emergency from running out of control. In the near future, the world may need to resort to lockdowns again, this time to tackle a climate emergency. Never mind, we have a new book out by the gentleman who wrote about it. He'd been a climate advocate for decades. He'd been a climate alarmist, a radical leftist climate alarmist, who actually wrote a book saying, I'd like to apologize because none of this was necessary. There was a grotesque exaggeration by climatologists about the severity, the seriousness, the danger of alleged climate change. You have all sorts of times over decades where climatologists make massively frightening predictions, and everyone thinks we're going to have to shut down everything, but then we have prediction after prediction after prediction shown to be false. We have glaciers growing where they claim they were going to end. We have the polar bear population exploding where they claim it was going to be diminished. Same with penguins. We have prediction after prediction by the climatologists, always dedicated to the proposition we're facing extreme emergency, so everything has to shut down. Everything must be as we require it to be. And you have many statements actually acknowledging by climatologists associated with the United Nations that the real point of pushing climate change was a massive forced wealth redistribution. Massive forcing of by the powers that be, the globalists that be, forcing the more successful nations, instead of exporting their ideas such as freedom and capitalism, just make them poorer and transferring money to other nations. That's what they were claiming. But back to this piece. This person is actually floating the idea of it may be time to tackle a climate emergency by resorting to lockdowns, requiring things like limiting private vehicle use, banning the consumption of red meat, imposing extreme energy-saving measures, and fossil fuel companies would have to stop drilling. The only way to avoid this lockdown is to launch a full-scale climate revolution, including a complete overhaul of capitalism. People, I'm telling you, and by the way, before I tell you why this matters so much, this is not some, goofball far leftist. I mean, she is a goofball far leftist, but this is an outlet that she works for, writes for, funded by Soros and Gates, George Soros and Bill Gates. So these leftists who love controlling everything, love controlling the world, funding an outfit with a woman now writing a piece urging her fellow leftists to understand we simply must engage in a climate, her term, climate revolution, a complete overhaul of capitalism. She wrote this piece for an outlet called Project Syndicate. Project Syndicate. It's a bellwether for the goals of the globalist elite. George Soros has written nearly 110 commentaries on this site, and both Bill and Melinda Gates have also written for it. I'm going to close out the first 5 by saying this. Since time began, there have always been people in this world who think their job is to control other people. That the masses need to be controlled, they need to be told where they can live and what they can do and what the limits are in their lives. And there have been, in this country, fortunately for us, there were at the time of our founding, people who got the fundamental idea of freedom. At the time of America's founding, at the writing of the Declaration of Independence, you had people saying, you know what, we the people have rights simply because we were born. We have the right to live in liberty. We have the right to pursue our own version of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We have rights from God just because we were born. The very nature of life is life, which we have God-given freedom. The purpose of the government in this country, in America, is to protect that God-given freedom. This is the revolutionary nature of America's very identity, that rights from God, protection from God, just because we're born, and the government's job is to protect the individual's freedom. It is not to control their every movement. But there have been, since time began, we now call them leftists. You could call them the monarchy in the past. You can call them dictators. You can call them mullahs. There's always a category of people thinking their job is to control everyone else. In 2020, this is what is on the ballot in America, which is the future of freedom in America. These kind of people talking about COVID shutdown in New York City, continuing all that they've been doing when there's no reason based on science, no reason based on numbers to do that, but de Blasio's out there texting, hey, you know what, folks, everybody going to keep on distancing, keep on wearing your mask, no large gatherings, no fun, no ordinary human life, no, can't have that anymore. And now you have someone actually in a left-wing outlet tied to the global elitists writing about the idea that we have to turn around now and have a climate revolution, or else we have to have climate lockdowns. Already penning out her ideas for how the global elites are going to tell the world how you can live, what you must do, whether you can drive your car, what kind of car you can drive, how comfortable you can be in your home. If it's hot in the summer or cold in the winter, they may just say too darn bad. These people use false crises as a justification to take away your freedom. This is what's on the ballot in 2020 and for a long time going forward, because the American people, and I love this idea of America, the people of America have already started to wake up about this COVID shutdown. Many millions of Americans are recognizing the shutdowns we are suffering under, the shutdowns we are honoring, the masking, the social distancing, the banning of normal commerce, the banning of normal businesses functioning at full capacity, the banning of certain numbers of people in churches and other places. There are millions of Americans awakening to the reality that we've been played by the tyrannical mindset that says The people, the peasants, the masses, they must be controlled. There is a spirit in America rising up that says, no, we are going to go back to the idea, the founding idea of America, the idea we live in freedom, because that's what we said in our American birth certificate, which is the Declaration of Independence. We, the people, have the right to live in liberty, and that's what's on the ballot in 2020. Because trust me, on this goofball, you think this person who wrote this piece in Project Syndicate is some Italian who cares about her. This is the mindset. This is the mindset of the global elites, who would happily control every aspect of your life if only you would agree. And that, my very fine friends, is today's First Five. Well, it's big news. A lot of you probably saw it, but Project Veritas, James O'Keefe's organization, Project Veritas, that does these underground videos. They video people who don't know they're being videoed, and they get to truth. You know, Veritas means truth in Latin. Project Veritas is seeking truth. They do all sorts of amazing, wonderful things. And their newest thing is exposing vote fraud in Minnesota, in Ilhan Omar's district. This is explosive. I'm going to ask Matt the Wonderful first to play a clip. This is just a small portion of the Project Veritas YouTube available. If you go to our website, AmericanCanWeTalk.org, on the homepage, under show, drop down list of links, you can find the link to this, and you can watch the whole thing yourself. Or just go to YouTube and put in Project Veritas, Ilhan Omar, vote fraud, and it'll come up. But I'm going to ask Matt the Wonderful to play a little clip for you.
James O'Keefe back here on the ground in Minneapolis. Our undercover journalists at Project Veritas have just exposed a voter fraud ring so widespread that many members of the Somali community here consider it an open secret. Many believe if this corruption continues, there'll be no more free elections. And our sources inside the Somali community here allege that the architect of this pay-for-vote scheme is none other than U.S. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar.
Your focus is winning no matter what you do. You ignore the rules and regulations. There's no moral and ethics here. It's just the end will justify the means.
Project Veritas has received an explosive piece of tape. The tape you're about to see shows a man buying a registration form for an absentee ballot from a voter, giving him, quote, pocket money, unquote, of $200 and expecting to collect his ballot when the voter receives it.
Now, folks, that you could listen to the whole long thing. The basic thing they're uncovering is that in the Somali community, in fact, on the show yesterday, Katie Hopkins was here in studio with us yesterday, and she had just returned from being in Minneapolis and talking about this Somalian community, Somali immigrants who have just clustered together in a particular area within Minneapolis. All of this is occurring that you're watching there in that area. And what Project Veritas uncovered, you can see they had to do English subtitles because the people aren't speaking English, but they got someone within the Somali community. The gentleman you just saw, his name is Omar Jamal. He worked with Project Veritas to uncover this. So you have him telling, this is what everybody sees. I could have played dozens of little tiny clips, maybe not dozens, but 6 or 7 really good, crisp, clear little segments of the actual interactions that were recorded secretly. So President Trump put out, so this all comes out, Project Veritas, forever and a day trying to expose wrongdoing. They would probably expose both sides, but they tend to expose things on the left, probably because more things that go on the left we need to know about that we don't know about. But Donald Trump tweeted out right after that, breaking new video, Omar connected harvesters seen exchanging a $200 for general election ballot. We don't care illegal. This is in quotes. He's in Trump's tweet. We don't care illegal. We are taking the money and we'll vote for you at Ilhan, Minnesota, which is her hashtag, her Twitter handle, is the one who came up with all of this. One of the people in one of the videos saying Ilhan Omar came up with all of this. Now, of course, Ilhan Omar's office has put out a statement flatly denying any wrongdoing, claiming that they've always made very clear, Ilhan Omar herself saying they've made very clear to their staff, they want everything to be above board, always follow the law, don't worry, don't do anything wrong. So she's denying it, and President Trump has called for an investigation. Can we find out what is really happening up there? Very, very difficult to do in this very cloistered, connected to each other, no assimilation, no connection, no involvement in Minneapolis society, cloistered little area. They call it Little Mogadishu in Minneapolis. But you have Trump saying got to investigate, and he's calling it out what seeming to be potential vote fraud. And you have Ilhan Omar saying no way, didn't happen, did not, that we wouldn't do any such thing. There are statements. I'm going to get to why this matters so much, but I mean obviously why it matters already. But there are statements out because they're looking into, what do the authorities say? Because obviously you hear these kind of things and you think, well, what in the world? What do the authorities say? So I'll tell you that in writing one article about this, people went and talked to some of the authorities in Minneapolis. So Hennepin County, which is where Minneapolis is Hennepin County, Minnesota. The county attorney there, Mike Freeman, responded to the news yesterday, by saying the Hennepin County Attorney's Office has received no information or cases involving so-called ballot harvesting. This is what ballot harvesting is, my very fine friends. Ballot harvesting, paying people to get their ballots. It happens many other ways. This particular thing that you were watching has to do with paying someone for their ballot. They said they have no information or cases involving so-called ballot harvesting in any elections held in Hennepin County this year. If Project Veritas has evidence of election law violations, they should provide it to the Minneapolis Police Department. Minneapolis Police Department just put out a statement saying allegations of voter fraud are being evaluated. The Minneapolis Police Department is aware of the allegations of vote harvesting. We're in the process of looking into the validity of those statements. No further information available. I will remind you, and we've talked about this before in this show, in 2005, there was a bipartisan report from the Commission on Federal Elections. This was chaired by former President Jimmy Carter, who is with the party that benefits from all this mail-in ballot harvesting scheme that is ongoing. Even that, chaired by Jimmy Carter, one of their findings, and the other person who chaired it was former Secretary of State James Baker, concluded absentee ballots remain the largest source of potential voter fraud. The opposite of going in person on election day or even early voting and voting, the absentee mail-it-in stuff. Attorney General Barr has also repeatedly said, mail-in voting absolutely opens the floodgates to fraud. So everyone who pays attention, who understands the way people who try to cheat in elections, everyone who's familiar with it says, yeah, I mean, obviously it's mail-in ballots, that's the way to do it. Ballot harvesting, getting a hold of mail-in ballots ahead of time. So there has been, an awareness that this kind of thing is ongoing and that it is a huge potential because you can't track it. You can't trace it. I mean, and you stop and think about it, this Project Veritas thing, I will say, these are arguments I'm going to make for why it is likely that what has been uncovered, what is being revealed by Project Veritas is true, likely to be true. Now, I don't know. I will say they're all allegations. There may be some explanations we don't understand. But I will say this. When you are this guy, Omar Jamal, and you're part of the Somalian community, and you're willing to come on camera and put your face into camera and your name and say, here's what's happening, that's pretty big. That's pretty big. That is not something you would do if you were unsure about it. Isn't something you would do if you were just heard rough suspicions. And what he reported was everyone knows about it. Everyone knows this is what happens. It's what you do. It's probably some of these people who came to America from Somalia and never really were part of any kind of legitimate elections. They may think, oh yeah, this is how you vote. You wait for the ballot harvester to come around. He's not really a ballot harvester. He's just your friend so-and-so. He comes around, he collects your ballot, he tells you how to fill it out. He gives you all the information, you fill it out, and he sends it in. That's what you do. They think that's what voting is. But number one argument why this seems very real and likely is because a guy like that is willing to put his face and his name on camera and tell about it. Number two is, it's just because you don't have any reports yet to the police department, to the county attorney's office of vote fraud is no reason to believe it doesn't exist. If you think about it, this is one of those crimes, nobody involved in the crime actually wants it reported. It's not like when your house is robbed or your purse is stolen, you know, you're the victim and you want to report it to the police because you want action. You want them to find the perpetrator. The people involved in the whole crime all want it to be kept secret. The people, the Somalian refugees who are voting in America, leave aside whether they have, I don't know if they all have a legal right to vote here, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they don't want to be subject to scrutiny. They don't want someone looking into whether or not they properly cast their ballot, and neither does the ballot harvester, and neither does the Democrat Party, who is behind all of this, or who appears to be behind it, or Ilhan Omar. Everyone wants it to be secret. But it's not a victimless crime. It's just that nobody involved in it is a victim. The victim of this crime is certainly the elections of 2020, the other voters who in their district who really aren't getting a fair election. They're not getting the outcome of the election based on one vote by one person, properly executed, properly carried out either in person or on paper. They're not getting that. And ultimately, the American people are the victim of these kinds of things, because the American people are the ones who you may think at the end, you know, well, I guess I was wrong. I guess everyone in the whole country just loves Joe Biden. No wonder he won 49 states. You think you were wrong. You don't even know whether the election was valid. You don't even know whether the outcome has anything to do with what the people really wanted. There are serious victims of this kind of vote fraud, not the people committing it. Not the voter or the ballot harvester or the Democrat Party or Ilhan Omar, all the people allegedly involved, but the actual American people and ultimately the very election process itself. That's who the victims are. So I will tell you something that is also ongoing in this election cycle, because here we are, you know, we're now, whatever it is, I can't lose track of the number of days, it's 39 days away or less to get to Election Day, November 3rd of this year. We have the left still pushing for mail-in ballots every place they can. And again, absentee ballots are when you meet at the particular criteria in your state, whatever your law says, you get to vote. You can vote a mail-in ballot based on the criteria in your state. And states have different laws about this. But the kind of absentee ballot thing is when you say, you know, I would like, I request a ballot, they mail it to me, I fill it out, I send it back in, and I'm allowed to do that because I meet whatever the standard is in the state where I live. I meet whatever the requirements are. Obviously, military ballots are that we send those abroad to our soldiers, and they are shipped back, and so they can participate in elections even though they're not in America at the time of the election. But that's what absentee ballots are. You request, they send, you fill out, send it back in. The mail-in ballot fraud, massive fraud the Democrat Party is attempting is, in every place they can get away with it, sending out large numbers of mail-in ballots unsolicited to people. And there have been all sorts of stories in the last week, military ballots being sent to people living in New York City. People receiving mail-in ballots who didn't ask for them. And you know, you could say, well, as long as everyone in the whole country is completely honest, then, you know, what the heck? You're only going to vote the mail-in ballot if you are entitled to, if that's how you want to vote. But honestly, we don't have a situation in America where every single person is honest, and we most certainly don't have a situation in America where every single person understands the process. The mail-in ballot process can lead to confusion. You didn't request it, but you come in the mail. Maybe it comes in the mail. You're not so savvy. You think, oh, well, I guess this is what I'm supposed to do. You fill it out, but then you don't feel sure. So then you mail it back in, then not feeling so sure. I really want to be sure I vote, so you go and vote again. All of this mess, when you have unsolicited millions of mail-in ballots floating around the country, and then you get to the question, of course, is who counts them? How do you decide whether the people who sent them in were entitled to do mail-in balloting? How do you decide which ones are valid or not? It's a big, giant mess intended to be so by the Democrats. And I want to tell you a particular thing. That is a they're using this strategy, the left in this mail-in ballot thing is using a strategy. The Perkins Coie lawyer, now if you recognize that Perkins Coie, that law firm, Perkins Coie, the same ones involved with aiding and abetting Hillary Clinton in soliciting the entire Steele dossier, the Russian dossier that gave life to the whole Russia collusion hoax. That's the same law firm. Perkins Coie, aiding and abetting Hillary Clinton, fooling around getting the Steele dossier going. In the middle of that, now this law firm, Perkins Coie, a lawyer named Mark Elias, is spearheading what he is calling the 4 pillars approach to further or to enable mail-in balloting. He is fighting to make sure his goal, this Perkins Coie lawyer in this election cycle, the Democrat-oriented law firm, this guy, Mark Elias, is fighting to make sure government pays the postage for all mail-in ballots. I can get with that, I guess. You know, if it's a valid mail-in ballot, you know, maybe the government should pay for it so it doesn't cost you money to vote. Number 2, ballots postmarked on or before Election Day count. So it's going to include some ballots that arrive after Election Day, but they got postmarked before or on Election Day, which of course extends the time before Americans can know who won the election. Because if you have a bunch of mail-in ballots floating through the mail, but they got date stamped on Election Day, then you're kind of waiting. We're waiting in all the vote centers to get these ballots in and start counting them. But that was his number 2. Okay, number 3, and this is the worst one. Every ballot, this is the push of the Democrat-oriented Perkins Coie law firm, the 4 pillars on pushing mail-in ballots this time. Every ballot is accepted, even if the signature does not match the one on file. Now, I can't even imagine how you justify that. How do you justify, yeah, you should accept this mail-in ballot. You know, this person's name is Susie Miller. Now, you know, last year she had her signature on file and she has a cursive backhand. That's her signature. But here it comes in and it looks like a very flowing, you know, and not backhand, totally opposite signature. They're saying it doesn't matter. Just count it. Doesn't matter if the signature matches the one they have on file. And finally, of course, and actually this is the worst one, they are pushing ballot harvesting, or their term for it, community organizations should be allowed to help collect and deliver voted sealed ballots, also known as ballot harvesting. You have to understand, my very fine friends, the left is on a mission, not just to push Democrat victory in the 2020 elections. That's clear. But they are on a mission to muddy the waters in this election cycle, muddy the waters so that we are unclear on Election Day who won, so that we have mail-in ballots floating around out there for who knows how long. So we have the kind of stuff you just saw on the Ilhan Omar allegation about her being, and she's the people involved in that, the Project Veritas video, they are saying Ilhan Omar was named by the people involved in this ballot harvesting scheme. She's being named as the one who organized it. Project Veritas isn't pointing the finger at her. The people that they videoed in the Somali community in Minneapolis, they're the ones saying, oh yeah, this is Ilhan Omar, yeah, she's the one doing this. So you have that kind of ballot harvesting where it is not the act of voting by an American citizen who's deciding, I got a ballot, I'm going to vote yes on this, no on this, I'm voting for Biden, I'm voting for Trump. It's not the process of voting. It is community organizers, radical leftists who are collecting ballots and filling in the ballots as they want them done. And there, of course, story after story, we'll get to the next segment, story after story of the way in which these things are collected. They're not even necessarily where the alleged voter had any idea that was even happening, that they were even participating in the election. So all of this is being pushed as mail-in ballot stuff, and in great part, tying this back to the first segment of our show today, all this in large part is being pushed by the Democrats because we have a COVID crisis. Because we're in a very dangerous time in this country, don't you see, because of coronavirus, which justifies can't have voting centers open, can't have people voting in person, because what about the risk of COVID? Now, you can have the rioters who are continuing to destroy property and riot in Portland and all over this country. The media isn't showing you. All over this country in big cities, it's still happening, including here in Dallas, Texas. We had an incident last night in Dallas, Texas, where people are in some restaurant in a lovely sitting outside, lovely evening last night in Dallas, and they have Black Lives Matter protesters screaming in their faces, yelling in bullhorns, yelling at them. And you know, police, we have the Dallas City Council has just voted to defund our police. Not entirely. They voted to cut back funding for our police. And police were already underfunded, already saying in Dallas we're underfunded. So you have all of this ballot harvesting operation scheme by the left justified by COVID, and yet we saw in the first segment of this show that even the CDC is basically saying virtually everybody in America, except the very, very senior, have over 99.9% likelihood of survival. You may get sick, you get the flu, you may get COVID, and you're going to survive. And we have all sorts of treatments working for people who get COVID, and yet the COVID crisis is justifying the mail-in ballot fraud. The COVID crisis is justifying the vote fraud scheme the left is now pushing with mail-in ballots. And people who don't want to support it are being told they're insensitive, they're endangering their fellow citizens. Never mind that the leftists who are so concerned about COVID spreading that you can't vote in person, but they at the same time are okay with Black Lives Matter protesters everywhere, destroying property, without masks on to boot, gathering in big cities, in mobs, shoulder to shoulder, no mask in many circumstances, definitely violating all sense of protocol of don't gather in large groups. I mean, people, if you cannot see through what the left is doing, I'm really, really alarmed. If you cannot see through what the left is doing. COVID is being used as an excuse to push the mail fraud, the vote fraud they want to have happen in this election cycle. It's outrageous, and American people need to be awake to it and push back in every jurisdiction, wherever you are, whatever state you're in. Push back with your attorney general, push back with your legislators, push back with your governor. Demand they stop humoring this mail-in ballot emergency, because we don't have an emergency and we can vote in person for the same reason that the mobsters can show up and destroy property in person in Portland and elsewhere. And one other quick story very related to this, which is right here in the great state of Texas. We had a mail-in ballot harvesting thing going on right here in Texas, recently uncovered. And I call it a mail-in ballot harvesting in Texas, but the interesting story in this, we had two investigators in Texas who had a former FBI agent and a former police officer have been investigating a ballot harvesting scheme in Harris County, most populous county in Texas, huge county. This is down in near Houston. So Harris County, Texas, massive mail-in ballot harvesting scheme uncovered, including seeming to involve presidential candidate Joe Biden's Texas political director implicated in this whole process. His name, the name of the gentleman who is the Joe Biden political director for Texas, his name is Dallas Jones. This guy implicated in this, you have the FBI, former FBI agent, former police officer, giving testimony, giving sworn affidavits, class action lawsuit in the Texas Supreme Court, basically saying this is a massive, in Harris County, voter fraud, ballot fraud scheme, ballot harvesting scheme ongoing. They actually named other people potentially involved, alleged to be involved in the ballot harvesting operation. And those people include District 13 Texas State Senator Boris Miles, who is the handler for this guy, Dallas Jones, political consultant Gerald Womack, and Precinct 1 Harris County Commissioner Rodney Ellis. So they have in their possession, here's what these people have told these people who are bringing this lawsuit, who are explaining what's happening. These former FBI, former police officer said, I have in my possession videotaped interviews of witnesses attesting to the aforementioned people having groups of people completing thousands of absentee and mail-in ballots, including completing ballots for deceased individuals, illegally going off to nursing homes with the complicity of the nursing home staff, and filling out and forging signatures of nursing home residents, signing up homeless individuals to vote using the ballot harvester's address. This is happening in Texas. And to be very clear about something, I am equally outraged whether it is occurring on the Democrat side or the Republican side. If there are people committing this kind of ballot harvesting fraud in any state in this country, either political party or whoever you are, all of it undermines all of America, undermines our very, very foundation of the idea of representative government, foundation of having a country rooted in fairness and freedom and an election cycle that we can trust the results. We're going to become a third world banana republic unless we get all of this under control. There has to be changes in our law. People who are ballot harvesters, it has to be made illegal everywhere. You can make it so everyone turns in their own ballot, or at the very most, one person turns in two. They have to sign in under penalty of perjury that they did not engage in any conduct, such as I was just reading that these people are alleging in Texas. There have to be massive, serious prison sentences for people who do this. They're not afraid to do the ballot harvesting because nothing ever happens to them. That is why they're not afraid to do it. Nothing ever happens. You have the rare case where you have a prosecution. People go, wow, so-and-so actually was prosecuted. It's so rare, it's shocking. It should be common. It should be so common that you know you'll be arrested and you know you'll go to jail that you'll just stop doing it. One last piece on this story, it's all related to this vote fraud stuff. My topic for today has to do with this. There's a lawyer who worked in the 2000, you may recall, 20 years ago now, in the year 2000, there was a big battle after our presidential election between Bush and Gore, George Bush and former Vice President Al Gore. And that case went on and on, many, many issues related to basically counting ballots, the whole hanging chads in Florida thing. But one of the lawyers involved in that is named Thomas Spencer. And he gave an interview, and what he was talking about in this interview was not really the Bush-Gore thing, but he's talking about what he uncovered as he worked on that case, understanding how vote fraud works, what the methods are. And I want to just tell you his language, what he says. He is now vice president. He's vice president of the Lawyers Democracy Fund, and he warned about the existence of a criminal underworld that perpetrates and perpetuates voter fraud. He talks about an underworld out there. It trades on ballots and forgeries. They prey on old folks or people in very poor communities. It's a huge problem. It's one of those subterranean, meaning below the surface, below the ground, nobody ever sees it, subterranean problems where it's very difficult to find out who these people are. He went through some of the examples a lot of us know already. The New York Post article about a Democrat political operative confessed to engaging in voter fraud for decades. This was reported in the New York Post. An election that swayed by 500 or 1,000 votes can make a difference. This tipster, remaining anonymous for fear of prosecution, it can be enough to flip states. He talked about the 1997 mayor's race in Miami. I think we talked about that before. Authorities charged 36 people with crimes involving absentee ballot fraud. In Miami, we still have vote brokers. Vote brokers would go around paying people for ballots. And so people, when you read about one story, and wow, it turns out one election judge let two people vote who weren't registered, or whose registration had lapsed, or who didn't have proper ID. This is tip of the iceberg stuff. It is an underworld of vote fraud put in place, practices, ballot harvesting, which are coming to the surface, and just like so many other things coming to the surface in America to be exposed, everybody has to care. Everybody has to speak up about it, or it will never change. It will never change. As I say, I am equally outraged by cheating, ballot harvesting, voting other people's ballots, cheating on mail-in ballots, all of that, whether it's the Democrat Party or the Republican Party. But in this election cycle, you have to understand the massive push on mail-in balloting is coming from the left because they know it is the best vehicle available to enable them to cheat. The left in this country, the Democrat media mob in this country, is so dedicated, so determined, so they will never rest until they can get rid of Donald Trump. They showed you that from the moment Donald Trump rode down that escalator and announced he was going to run for president. Since that day, you've had people on the radical left in this country trying to destroy him, and we all watched the FBI, DOJ corruption. They're going after him from inside our government under the Obama administration, and all of the leftists under him, under Obama, in the DOJ, FBI, going after Trump. We watched the Russia collusion hoax. We watched the entire impeachment farce. We watched attack after attack after attack. We watched them manipulating COVID, justifying COVID as the excuse for the mail-in ballot fraud. I am saying that in this election cycle, the left has never been more motivated than they are this time in this election cycle in 2020 to do whatever it takes to get rid of Donald Trump, not just because they want a D and not an R in the White House, but because the Trump administration has been so successful in pushing the agenda of restoring America, restoring the greatness of America, restoring love of America, and exposing the swamp in Washington as no other person ever has in that White House. And you have a president who, when he went to Washington, it was kind of like, you know what, we're going to turn the lights on, and the rats and the cockroaches are scurrying to the corners, trying to be hidden and trying to get rid of that guy who turned the lights on. That's what's happening in vote fraud in this country in this election cycle, and that is why it's so important in every single instance to push maximum prosecution, change in laws, maximum punishment, long jail terms for people who commit vote fraud, ending ballot harvesting, everything possible has to be put into play. Every challenge should be made when the left is going to, because what they're going to do between November 3rd, the real election day, and whenever we finally get to an answer, is going to be to push for the mail-in ballots to have no validity, no justification, to push for those to be counted and to somehow and in some way manipulate the entire election process to make sure they can finally get rid of Donald Trump, the arch enemy of the radical left in this country. One last topic, very quick. I'm going to a humorous topic because, you know, my show is always really intense. But yesterday on my show, if you watched, we had Katie Hopkins. I spent a lot of time with Katie Hopkins in the last 48 hours, laughing ourselves silly. She is really funny. If you think she's funny on stage, she's hilarious in person. Part of what she talks about, I get really intense on my show, as those of you who watch all the time have noticed. I get very intense. But what I'm intense about is preserving America, because America is a good and noble and great nation, and because the ideas of America matter. And I truly believe millions and millions of Americans are on the side of preserving America. Millions of Americans have their eyes open. They can see what the left has done under COVID and how that has taken away our freedom. They can see what the left has done in so many cases, and they want their country back. They want their joy back. You heard Katie talking yesterday. Part of what's happened under COVID is we've lost we can't see each other's faces. We can't see each other smiling at each other. We can't have a group of people together laughing ourselves silly. We can't have time together just being joyful and singing. You can't sing in many public elementary schools and churches around this country because they're afraid about the claim is because singing involves exhaling air and you may be spreading COVID, so no singing, no joy, no laughter, no smiling, no groups together. We have a pall that the left is trying to put on this country, trying to suppress our joy, our health, the normalcy of American life. And you had Katie Hopkins, the hilarious and insightful. She's a deeply insightful thinker. She's insightful. She is discerning about people. And she sees the greatness of America and sees the joy in America. And that's one of her messages as she goes around the country. You know, just don't let them take away our joy. Don't let them take away our happiness. Be happy, be joyful, love this country, express that love, show that love, be grateful, be happy, because there are millions of reasons to be happy about the great blessing of living in this country. Millions of reasons to be happy to be in this country at this time. We're here at this time. All of us are here at this time to defend this country, to stand up for it, to celebrate it, to share with our friends why America is so extraordinary and so great. So in the spirit of laughter, as Katie is so capable of doing, I was going to share one really funny story. So if you don't know BabylonBee, you should get to know BabylonBee. It is a spoof website. They put out spoof postings. And the reason they're so hilarious, it's not a joke-telling site. It's a very, very clever spoof publication. And kind of like some of those really brilliant political cartoons, like the AF Bronco does brilliant political cartoons. AF Bronco, great, funny, just really clever political cartoons. He puts those out, and the reason they're so clever is because there's truth to what he's saying. It's not just a funny drawing or a funny tagline. It conveys a truth that everyone knows is true. Well, the same is true with BabylonBee. So the funny thing was, BabylonBee put out a story, a headline that said that Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death was overturned by the Ninth Circuit. Okay, so you can see why that's funny. The Ninth Circuit, which has been, up until fairly recently, has been a radical leftist. The Democrats can always count on the Ninth Circuit to do whatever the radical left wants in this country. They don't feel compelled to follow the law. They make up stuff as they go along, version of being judges. They're leftist judges. They don't follow the Constitution. They don't follow law. They just make up stuff. The leftist version of the Ninth Circuit. Now, it has gotten better because President Trump has been able to add some judges to the Ninth Circuit, so it's not as bad as it was. But the humor in that is that, here, obviously, Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed on, and we've all honored her. We've had many, many honorings of her. She lay in state at the Capitol, or the Supreme Court at the Capitol, I think, and we've had many, many testaments to her greatness and her bravery. I told you what I think she lived out the values she believed in, but I don't agree with her values. But in any case, so they did a spoof saying the Ninth Circuit is so extreme, so unwilling to accept anything that is in any way positive for, that could move the court more conservatively. So they put out this thing, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, death overturned by Ninth Circuit. And the really funny thing is that the USA Today, the actual allegedly serious publication, USA Today, fact-checked the BabylonBee story that said that the Ninth Circuit overturned Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death. They actually did a fact check. They ran an article saying, we've actually checked. We look at the Ninth Circuit's docket. We review the cases. There's no such case at the Ninth Circuit claiming that they could overturn Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death. I mean, it's so absurd. But I found that really, really funny. I think that the BabylonBee is clever as all get out. I urge you to read it. It just can make you smile at the end of the day. Very, very funny. But the idea that they actually had, in fact, they had a tweet out. I should have sent it to Matt to show you. But anyway, BabylonBee had a tweet. Ninth Circuit Court overturns death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. A landmark case, blah, blah, blah. And so, I mean, it's obviously absurd and silly. Obviously, a court cannot overturn anyone's death. But the USA Today and their just determination to, it isn't just that they, I don't know, it's a determination to shut down any levity and a determination to how dare you be so disgraceful. Maybe someone, crazy person out there might believe it, so we better point out it's not true. So they actually ran a story, USA Today, fact-checked and said, actually, folks, in case you believe that story, the Ninth Circuit really did not overturn Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death. Anyway, so they had citations, they had like footnotes, USA Today footnotes proving their investigation to say that they had, that they'd proven absolutely that the Ninth Circuit indeed did not overturn Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death. And that, my very fine friends, is my show for today. I'm going to turn in one moment to my Why It Matters to You, which I always close out the show by telling you why it matters to you. I'll tell you two quick things. We had a stellar conference in Dallas this past Saturday. I hosted the first annual American Women and American Freedom Conference. It was a home run. We are going to work over the next several weeks getting segments of that available for people to see. We had stellar speakers. I mean, it was just so good, so high energy, so impactful. A lot of women just pumped up. Really, the mission is to encourage women to be voters for and advocates of standing up for American freedom, to not buy into the victim mission of the left, which is to always tell women all you are is victims. And we're saying, no, women are strong and we're smart and we're successful and anyway, it's a great, great conference. I'll be sharing that with you more. If you're watching this show, however you're watching or listening to it, I would love if you would go to my website, americacanwetalk.org, and on the home page, number one, click on the subscribe button. I have a weekly newsletter. I did miss the last 2 weeks because of busyness, but we'll be coming out this Friday. A weekly newsletter. You just hit subscribe, put your email in, you get a newsletter once a week. I never share the emails with anybody, but it gives you a catch up on the show. You can get interviews I've done, past shows. It kind of gives you just a quick summary of everything we talked about. It's a great way to catch up on the show on the weekend, and it's a great way to share the show. We'd love if you would do that. Also, we have a donate button on that page. People, my show is being attacked and tethered and censored by the social media giants. I could spend a whole show running through with you, showing you all the ways we can see that social media is censoring the show. So if you like this show and you'd like to help it continue, please consider supporting it financially. This is a listener-supported show. If you would go to my homepage, americacanwetalk.org, on the homepage, hit the donate button. You can donate for a one-time donation, or you can make a recurring donation. It's simple. I cannot tell you how much I'd appreciate that. I am never going to stop talking about preserving this country and saving America, and I need your help. I would so appreciate your support if you would support this show. Now I'll turn and tell you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. We started out today talking about COVID and now climate lockdowns. Leftism starts with godless materialism, that's all there is, and then demands an all-powerful government control of all but the ruling class. It is the destruction of individual freedom. New York City Mayor de Blasio tweets intent to keep lockdowns until COVID is down to 0. Okay, what he's telling you, down to 0 means we're never going to end. That's what he's saying. 0 deaths, cases, forever. Utterly absurd, unjustified, unnecessary. And you have Soros Gates linked outlet publishes a call for possible climate change lockdowns. There is no limit to the left's desire to control people. Americans must recognize freedom is on the ballot November 3rd. Trump and the R are the only choices for preserving freedom. And then Veritas, Ilhan Omar, and vote fraud. Why it matters to you. Project Veritas unveiled videos with open acknowledgement of ongoing ballot harvesting fraud operation linked to Ilhan Omar in Minnesota. The evidence is stone cold clear. Law enforcement in Minnesota under Democrat control. Trump has called for investigation. This is an in-your-face criminality to control election. I'm sorry, I'm trying to fix something on my phone. Okay. This is law enforcement in Minnesota under Democrat control. This is in-your-face criminality to control elections. There is nothing left if this is not rooted out and stopped. Will anything happen from the Democrat Attorney General? Probably not. Will the people of Minnesota ever rise up to demand justice? And in the mail-in ballot harvesting in Texas, similar to Minnesota criminality, Biden, Texas political director implicated, Texas state senator implicated, claims of ability to control 700,000 votes in Harris County, Houston area. Democrat legal demands raid mail-in voting as a vast existing criminal underworld operating voting fraud. Government must pay postage. Postmarked on or before November 3rd must be counted no matter when delivered. Ballots must be accepted even if the signatures don't match, and community organizations can collect and deliver ballots. This is ballot harvesting per se. There is no limit to how far the Democrats will go to cheat and steal elections. Will Americans tolerate this when it is so openly ongoing? And finally, hilarious fact check by BabylonBee. B satire headline claims Ninth Circuit overturned Ginsburg death certificate. USA Today actually fact checks and announces false. These people are ridiculous. BabylonBee is a preeminent online satire site. Check it out. USA Today epitomizes the state of journalism in America in 2020. Completely unserious, completely unable to understand America's distrust due to fake news, not funny satire. And that, my very fine friends, is my show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to America Can We Talk every Monday through Thursday at 3 p.m. Central Time, where I always talk truth about America because America matters. And I will talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.